Hello and welcome to Stew Videos. Today I will cover the very sensitive topic of the refugee crisis. To make things clear, I would like to emphasize that I am all for allowing refugees and migrants to come through the borders of Europe and that they should be offered as much assistance as possible without undermining economic structures or labour markets. I will try to address as many arguments as I can against the allowance of refugees to enter Europe. I will start with the argument of counter-terrorism. First of all, a problem with the logic of disqualifying refugees from entrance into your nation is that it does not really have an impact on the amount of terrorist attacks in it. Now, I'm aware that ISIS have stated that they have smuggled thousands of fighters into Europe among the wave of refugees, but this is yet to be proven true. A lot of people are blaming the wave of refugees in Europe for the recent influx in terrorism. This is not at all true. In all three major terrorist attacks in Europe recently, it had been proven false. The perpetrator of the Nice attack was a legal immigrant from Tunisia with French residency. All of the perpetrators of the Paris attacks were EU citizens, and in the Brussels airport bombing, the same thing applies, all were EU citizens, once again. There is simply no evidence to support that refugees are causing terrorism. My other opinion here is that the moment you decide to stop allowing innocent refugees access to your country because you fear that terrorists may be among them, the terrorists have already won. You're living your life in caution of an entire subset of people because some of them have done bad things. This is just not a healthy attitude to take. The reason homegrown extremism is a problem right now is because of the attitudes that us Westerners take towards our cohabitants. We segregate and disenfranchise Islamic populations, which causes them to turn resentful. If you want to stop terrorism, then treating these people like you would anyone else is certainly how you do it. And finally, on the topic of terrorism, take a look at this graph. This is the number of people killed per year by terrorism in Western Europe from 1970 to 2015. If you look at the 70s and the 80s, you'll see that terrorism was so much higher then because we had separatist European groups such as the ETA and the IRA who were much more active than ISIS. Another thing is that not that many people are killed by terrorism either. In France, over 3,200 people die a year just from car accidents, and if you look at this year, only 120 have died in terrorist attacks. And compared to deaths from cancers, heart disease, and many others, road traffic accidents are a very small cause of death also. We could be preventing a lot more death by using the money we spend on counter-terrorism measures on helping people suffering with illnesses. Okay, now the topic of economic impact. I'm well aware that there is a genuine concern that an influx of cheap labour into an economy will cause wages to go down. However, I don't think that there is much of a concern here. The kinds of jobs in which the cheap labour will have an effect is in the jobs that are already low income, that natives to our country don't even want. I'm seeing it here in Ireland. A lot of Polish and Romanian immigrants are being hired into low income jobs en masse because the native Irish simply don't want these jobs. The cheap labour is healthy for the market. In fact, here in Ireland we don't even allow refugees to work until they're granted asylum, which can take as long as 12 years to happen. On a side note, I do think that it is a terrible system, and I may make a future video detailing our direct provision scheme and why it is so bad. It is general consensus among economists that immigration is purely good for an economy. If you're really worried about the lowered wages in McDonald's, then you should really lobby your public representatives if you want a higher minimum wage. That's how you solve that kind of thing. Another thing about the economic impacts is that I've looked at the findings by the European Parliament and the IMF in their reports on the refugee crisis, and there doesn't really seem to be any bad economic impacts of the refugees in Europe. It seems agreed that generally there will be benefits. I also urge you to remember the state of population decline that is approaching Europe. In the Western world, people are becoming more educated and focusing on careers as opposed to family, which I think is fantastic, but it does have the side effect of less children being born, which leads to the aging population that we're seeing in the Western world. A lot of the refugees coming to the continent are young men who are of a good working age, who can fill job vacancies in many low-income jobs such as manual labour. One other thing here is that people often claim that most of the refugees entering Europe are economic migrants. I don't know if there's substantial evidence to support this claim, but even if you guys showed me some good evidence to support this, I'd still say to let refugees and migrants alike through. First of all, because as I've said, immigration is beneficial to economies. Second of all, because of my multiculturalist beliefs, which I will address in greater detail in a few minutes. And lastly, because I don't think we should hinder the access of the genuine refugees to our country because of the people who are taking advantage of their dire situation. There was an 18th century judge in England, William Blackstone, and he produced a very well-known formulation in a legal commentary of his, which is one deeply ingrained in my philosophy. It states, "It is better that 10 guilty persons escape than 1 innocent suffer." I think it can be applied to the refugee crisis, in that it is better that 10 economic migrants gain access to Europe than 1 genuine refugee is turned away. Another slightly unrelated argument that I feel I should address under this section of the video is the argument that Syrian refugees should have to go to other countries in the Middle East if they're so threatened. And newsflash, they have. 4.8 million have fled to Turkey, Jordan and Lebanon alone, compared to the 1 million in Europe last year. More news, it has arguably helped the economies of these countries. Take this, Lebanon has taken over 1 million refugees, which is around 25% of the Lebanese population. And the country's economy has not collapsed, but we're worried about the EU economy collapsing, despite the fact that we're taking in less than 0.5% of our population in refugees. The economic effects are great at best and negligible at worst. Now, finally, the societal and cultural impact of the refugee crisis. This is probably the most subjective part of my beliefs on the issue. I'm not sure if I'll be able to convince a lot of you my way, but there seems to be a general idea among most people I've talked to that Islam and Levantine culture is not compatible with Western values and the European way of life. I really dispute this fact. Europe is a continent of immigrants and conquerors. The nomadic immigration and conquest of Europe is how our cultures took shape and how our Western values came into being. Europe is and always has been a place of multiculturalism, and I know that some people don't like this idea, but I love that I can walk down a street in Dublin and see places that sell Lebanese and Indonesian food. And I can walk through a market and find Nepalese woolly jumpers, that I can go to the very park where our president lives and attend a festival that celebrates Baltic culture. I mean, that's just the wonder of multiculturalism. I would love to experience the ins and outs of Middle Eastern culture and to really see what it's all about. I know that when a lot of people say that Islam is a mental illness and that it promotes killing, I mean, I really doubt that those people have read the Quran. Even if you guys are so right and the Islamic populations won't assimilate, remember that the refugees take up less than 0.5% of the European population, so I don't think you need to worry too much. Overall, I think it's important that we foster a welcoming attitude towards the refugees coming into Europe, and I believe we should make efforts to ensure that they enjoy their stay, and that they can live in harmony with us native Europeans. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching my second video. The support for the first video was overwhelming, and I'm definitely going to continue to do these. If you have any topics you want me to voice my opinion on, just leave a comment and I'll consider it. Until next time, see you all later.